I'll make a few corrections to that. It says I invented metadirectory technology, and the truth is I built the first metadirectory. But I always point out that in terms of defining it theoretically and making it a marketing category and giving it words and all of that, I owe everything to my esteemed colleague, Craig Burton, who I dearly love. So, and that's one of the main reasons I'm here. But in addition, he loves the contact-centric stuff. Brought it to my attention, and it really knocks me out too. So I'm very, very pleased to be able to be here, but I have to preface things by saying that I work in a different part of this is like a really complicated area, this whole identity area, and I don't think anybody can master all of it. I'm quite specialized in various parts of it, and I try and stay there. People keep asking me, why don't you, broaden out and do more stuff? And basically, I don't want to. I would rather just do one thing and make it work. Of course, that's kind of hard and unlike what a lot of people do. So I'm going to start by talking about identity, and I would say it's the stuff of poets and philosophers, but I'm not going to talk about that. That's a great pursuit. I think it's very important. I have no expertise. This is the wrong venue. So I talk about a specific aspect of identity. Once again, I'm sort of like a plumber at the cocktail party. I talk about digital identity, just something very nitty-gritty, what we need in order to get to certain, well, basically to protect our digital world from a bunch of potentially very nefarious and dystopic futures. So to me, digital identity is really how the world recognizes us in different contexts. So it's the foundation for personalization. And I think what people have to understand is that it is as important as the mouse or the keyboard as an input device into people's applications and experiences. So it's the new input device that changes the way applications behave. It's the foundation, the very foundation for collaboration and social phenomena. Because I can't collaborate over time if I don't recognize you. Now, to be able to collaborate, we need to traverse silos. But on the other hand, nobody wants all of the information about all aspects of their life to be shared with everyone. And so there's a dialectic here. We not only want to traverse silos, we want to maintain separation between silos. And who should decide on what that separation and connection is? It's us as people who, and this is really one of the central aspects of this user-centric revolution that we're talking about today. So each person has a mosaic of identities, and the world should make sense to a person in terms of their mosaic. That's the user-centric vision. But today, the world is organized for us by all of the enterprises and governments and, big centralized things which first had computers. Those were the ones, after all, who had the computers, the mainframes, the IBM, and big mainframes in the 60s and 70s, and developed the systems and the thinking and the paradigms. So we need to be able to move from that world where they defined us to the world where we have a mosaic in which they live, and they see us as people who they relate to who have a mosaic. So this is all well, but there is this small architectural problem. The internet wasn't designed with any way of knowing who you're connecting to. So of course that's not a criticism. The internet is the best thing that's come along since we figured out how to get out of caves. I think it's great. but it does have this architectural problem, and it's the same as any other architectural problem. I don't know if anybody's had a house with an architectural problem, but there's nothing more expensive, nothing harder to deal with. It's like, suppose somebody invented a house and they forgot to put bathrooms in it. That's what we're dealing with on the internet, where we're just missing this essential component. And what happens when you don't have an architecture is people have to fill in. They have to substitute for it. And so what we have on the internet is really a patchwork of kludges. Now, Steve, I've probably pronounced that in my quaint Canadian way, so I apologize. All right. So what would you do in order to deal with this architectural problem and this need to traverse silos and so on? So you need what I call an identity metasystem. So it's an identity layer for the internet. And so let's start by saying it has to go across OSs. It has to, I mean, that's really small stuff. It has to go across vendors, of course, but it has to go across industry sectors. It has to go across national boundaries and cultures. Because you can't have, in the world of the internet, different architectures in all of these different places. And most important, you can't have any vendor ownership. And you have to, and that applies not only to technology, but to services. People have to have identity options and choice, the right and the ability to select who is going to speak for them, under what circumstances, and what they're going to interact with. So you need this system to also allow the user to see the different aspects of her digital life in a holistic way. Now, I'm going to go back in time. This is a time travel experiment. And for perhaps the older people in the audience will help the younger ones understand this horrible period when we had to walk to school every day and, for 20 miles through the snow and had no shoes. So, at the same point in time, when you wanted to have a disk in your computer, first you had to check, will this disk work with the software that I already own? And then you had to say, if you wanted to buy a new piece of software, you'd go, gee, will this work with the disk that I have? Because the software was written right down to the smallest details of the disk drive. You had to know how many heads it had and how many sectors it had. And if you were a programmer, you had to actually figure out where on this disk is this stuff going to go. And it was awful. It was awful to program to, and it was a very, very slow-moving world, because since nothing was interchangeable, you couldn't really evolve things. There was no way that you could move on to better and faster disk drives and cheaper ones and so on, because you were married to the ones that you already had. And what we did was, as an industry, we invented this idea of a device driver. And so the device driver spoke to the disk, and it understood all of the complexities of where the heads were and what was going on. And then at the level of the person who was programming, we had an abstraction. It was called a file. The file, I know, okay, everybody now who goes to university and studies computer science, they think, oh, file, of course, a file, right? The file was a big deal. File is a stream of bytes, and now you don't have to think about any of that physical stuff. So what we need, and once we had files, everybody could start thinking about where things were, and we eventually added visuals to the files, and then people could drag and drop and blah, blah, blah. But without having that basic thing there, that abstraction, none of this would have been possible. Now, do we have that in identity? The answer is no. We don't have the equivalent of a file. We're still at the level of dealing with tracks, heads, and cylinders. And so we need a model that allows us to go beyond that. And the model is what we call the claims-based model. So this is the abstraction layer, and it applies to authenticating, authorizing, obtaining information about users, devices, and services, all that kind of stuff. And the essence, the equivalent of a file, is what we call a claim. A claim is a statement made by one subject about another subject that is